And welcome back to your regularly scheduled programming. I am John the Code Wizard, and today we're going to be reviewing the same content that we did last week with our coffee shop. It's very exciting. So last week, during the video, we saw that there was a couple bugs in our code where it wasn't doing exactly what we were expecting to. I elaborated that when you're doing your coding, you want to try and break it. I know that sounds bonkers, but you'll learn so much more by breaking your stuff than you will actually by getting it right the first time. It starts with our pseudocode. Pseudocode is you can put it on a piece of paper, you could write it out, you could put it in your code like I did here. But it's basically the English version of what the code is supposed to do, what we're expecting it to do, kind of what we want it to do. Notice how there's no actual code here. It's all just English. So the first thing that we want to do is that we want to display the name of our coffee shop. And then we show a menu of options. I've got a couple of the options here. I couldn't help myself by putting them in parentheses, separating by commas, almost like a list. And then, or I should have put accept an input from a user. And then if they pick the new sale option, then we do stuff for the new sale. If they pick the check the current sales goal button, then we do that. If we display the total, oh, yeah, that's what that is. Or if they click 3, it'll close the shop. And then afterwards, we have our different variables. The price for the coffees is open is true. That's a Boolean value that we're going to tell if the store is open or not. We're going to use it to close the shop. And then we have to have a variable for our user's choice. We can accept an input from a user by using this blue input here. What this does is it prints out whatever's inside the parentheses to the user. It's called a prompt. And then it will accept that input. Normally it converts it into a string. Strings, as we know, are normally surrounded by parentheses, and that is going to be our choice. So notice how, even though we're using numeric choices earlier in our pseudocode, it will convert it into a string. So we're matching strings. Just so that we remember, the number one is not going to equal the string one. These are two different data types. So if you're making that comparison, it's not going to work. It goes back to our lesson of computers will do exactly what you tell them to. The problem is they'll do exactly what you tell them to. All right. Today's class is brought to you by Team 4 Star. Just kidding. Those guys are amazing. I love the shirt. So then we have, yes, as a variable for, let's just run it. We're going to run the code, show you what it looks like. I have a built-in feature where it has us check for the employee name. We went into great depth last time on verifying whether they're an employee or not. I'm just going to go ahead and bypass that by entering John, if I can spell my name properly. There we go. Make this large here. That didn't help. So then it prints out our menu item, our screen here. I'm scrolling down, but I can't because it's part of the execution. So now it's asking us for another selection. The first bug that we see is that it is asking for a selection. It gives us a prompt, incorrect menu choice entered, which tells me that it received an input somehow. It made a comparison somewhere in the code before we actually gave it our first selection. So that's going to be the first thing that we try and find. The first bug we're going to squash. Fun fact, the phrase computer bug came back from a time in history where they used to use punch cards with their computers. The computers were huge in the size of big rooms. And what would happen is bugs would actually, like actual bugs, would get into the machines and start to eat the paper. So it would cause a malfunction. They'd have to open up the machines, and sure enough, computer bugs. So that's where we get it from. Super gross. This is our function for verifying an employee. Remember, we talked about function as having to have a def or a define, followed by the name of the function, parentheses, and then a semicolon. Everything under that is indented if you want it to be a part of that function. Python does this really cool thing where we can click this drop down, so everything is extrapolated back If I push the right button, there we go. We have a while loop. So what does this function do? We went into it last time, so if you want, you can go back and watch the video. But for my people in-house, we're printing the startup screen. Then we have a counter. We initialize it to 0. Then while, or as long as, the counter is less than 5, we're going to immediately add 1 to the counter. Again, counter plus equals 1 is the same thing as counter is equal to counter plus 1, not plus 11, plus 1. Think of it like shorthand. I wonder, is that where that came from? Shorthand versus longhand? I don't know. So that was a really bad joke. But now I need to know which one of my hands are shorter. Okay, so then we take an input from the customer, the name. Enter, I'm sorry, from our employee, name. It's prompted with an input. Notice how we have a white space here. Keep the white space so that whenever they type it in, it doesn't keep it right next to it. Makes it a little easier to read as a human. So we get the name, and then we check it. I surrounded these with parentheses. You don't have to have them. When I have multiple conditions I'm checking for, I like to use the parentheses for my own visual aspects, while this or that. So I keep them grouped to make sure that one of the conditions is going to run true. Nowadays it's Andrew. We're going to move this to Andrew because he used to be James apparently. So if the name that the employee matches is equal to Andrew, or if it's equal to John, then we're going to print access granted. Welcome to work. These little backslash n's, this is a special carriage return character. It adds a new line. I'm going to run the code up until this point, and we're going to see where it's going to prompt us for the name. So we print startup screen, and then enter employee name. It's right here, I believe, in the code. So I'm going to enter in John, enter. Then it returns true. The printed access granted, but you can't see that screen. There it is. Access granted, space, welcome to work, space, space. So that's why the cursor is here, and that there is more than one space. So then it returns true. Anytime you return, use that keyword return. Notice how it's in blue. And notice how, I love this. Notice how whenever you, I don't know how many times I'm going to say notice how. Keep a running tally. Put it in the comments. I want to know. So if you notice how return, when you click on it, stop it, click. It shows me everywhere where the instance is here in the code. Return true or return false. When you call a function, you're expecting a response. So call and response. This is just the definition of the function. We're not actually calling it. Not yet. Let's find out where we are. Here we go. In the main function, 139. So it's expecting a true value. I'm going to go with that backwards logic. We got to go through the verify employee. We know that if you hold down control and double click, it takes you back to where it's defined. So it's kind of a shortcut. So we need it to return true. That means that they are an employee if it returns true. If they're not an employee, it returns false. So if not true is the same thing as false. So if false, it's not going to do everything inside the loop. The if statement, sorry. This is a conditional logic. So if true, then do the stuff on the inside of the indentation. So this is looking for not false. If it returns false, that means they're not an employee. If they're not an employee, it's going to set menu choice, which we established here, equal to the value of 5. Why that's important is because of this next step. So if not false, that means if it's true, do the inside. A better way would be to get rid of the not and reverse these so that the English actually makes sense. I don't know why I didn't do this earlier. True. Okay. So this will return a false value. So now we take the not out of it. So if it returns true, then they are not an employee. See, that's why I put the not in there, because the English is weird. If false, then it's not going to do the next step. If they're not an employee, it sets our menu choice is equal to 5. This while loop, while the menu choice is not equal to 5. So if it is 5, it's going to skip the whole thing. Fails the first attempt. Executes the close-up function. Shuts the program down. Non-employees are not allowed to work here. Let's remember our same problem that we had. We were trying to get an input from a user, but we didn't give them an opportunity to enter that input. Instead, we had a print to the screen that said, that's an invalid input. Enter a new one. So that's where our bug was. We've got to find out where that's at. And that was after we verified the employee. That's after we displayed the first menu. So then it's got to be in this menu choice here, which is another function. Comment your code. When you make a new function, always comment your code. Super important. You'll thank yourself 6 years later. I wrote this about 6 years ago. Neat. So verify menu choice. Notice the heavy use of underscores. Goodness, instead of camel case. Menu choice is equal to 7. That is a default value that's outside of our normal parameters of 1 to 5. Interesting. Incorrect menu choice entered. Please re-enter your selection. So we're going to put a breakpoint here because this is the error that we saw that we weren't expecting to see. So by putting the breakpoint at line 92, it's going to run through our main function, establishing our variables, verifying the employee. It's going to go all the way here to 144, jump back up. It's like a choose your own adventure book. Goosebumps. I guess they had those too, didn't they? So we're going to execute the code. Click start. We have our startup screen. And see the employee name. That was me being extra. Oh, I put another breakpoint. I stopped it at false. All right. But it stopped because it was still there. It's like, did exactly what I told it to. It's not what I intended, but it is what I told it to do. Because it happened quickly, I'm just going to show it displayed the menu, which is what we were expecting. Display menu on 143. It doesn't actually give us a response. The response is, it's basically just a print screen. Prints all this stuff to the screen as displayed through here. So we don't need to go into the menu, even though I just did. Instead, now we have menu choice is equal to 7. So while menu choice not in range 1 to 6, this is a start and stop value. Notice how when I hover over here, it doesn't actually say. Range is a class. I thought it would. It is a keyword, which is why it's highlighted a different color. So while it's not between 1 and 5, I'm sorry, 1 and 6, not including 6. Does include 1, does not include 6. So 1 to 5. Then we want them to enter in another choice. Because it's a while loop, we established it. This is a default variable. So it's going to trigger every time we run it because we set it as a default. What can we do? What can we do? What we can do we can say first time. First time is equal to true. So if menu choice is equal to 7, first time is equal to false. Okay, I'm going to stop the code just because the lines bother me. All right. I'm going to disable the breakpoint. Notice how it keeps the ring. So if I want to remember where I had it before, but I'm not going to use it right now, that's what I can do. So we have a first time Boolean variable. We set it to false, default to false. This is still not going to work. Thank you. Menu choice is equal to 7. If menu choice is equal to 7, which it is, first time is going to be true. Nah, it's still not going to work. Right, because it establishes that first time is equal to false every time. So how do we establish the variable inside the while loop? We're going to get rid of that. Menu choice. While menu choice is not in range 1 to 6. Ah, I've got it. We can look at the error again real quick. No problem. Just make sure we're on the same page. Get rid of all this first time nonsense. Okay. I'm going to put a breakpoint. Yeah, here's good. So it's going to ask us to enter in the employee name. Then it prints the screen. And it says incorrect menu choice entered. Please re-enter your selection. But we didn't give it a selection. The reason for that is because we defaulted this variable to the number 7. 1 to 6. Yeah, if it's not from 1 to 5. Because our menu options are only from 1 to 5. Because if the option is not from 1 to 5, then we need a new entry. The answer is so much more simple than I've been trying to beat my head against this wall. We have to actually try and get a menu input. We've already prompted the user for the menu input. That's why we display the menu. Equals. No, no, no. There we go. So with our display menu, make a selection on line 83 is presented to the customer. We already told them that they need to pick one. So we don't have to re-prompt them, but we do have to get an input from them before even trying to loop. So we do that here. This establishes that menu choice variable. It makes it so we don't have to do a whole is first time craziness. We might do that with the Knights tour. You guys are going to hate that. While menu choice is not in range, so this takes the input that we enter. Remember, it comes in as a string. We convert it to an integer, a number, because it's checking for numbers here, 1 to 6. If it's not a number within 1 to 6, then it's going to get it again. If it is a number within 1 to 6, it doesn't do the while loop, returns our choice. It's not going to get to the return option if it breaks in the while loop. John? Ah. I'm going to do exactly what I did again. Let's see if you notice. Oh, sorry. The white space. It counts that as a character. If you enter in a white space when it's not expecting, because the employee is got no white space on here. Now, in this, we can trim the white space off of it if we want to, but for the sake of time, we're just going to not enter accidental white space on a part of this on the part of the program that I haven't actually asked you guys to write yet. So now we have our menu. It's paused, waiting for an input. I think the better thing as far as design goes would be make a selection at the bottom of the menu, just as a display so that they know what to do. But this kind of makes sense. So we're going to make a selection. We're going to enter the number numlock 3. Now it returns, it sees our menu choice down here, number 3, and it's going to continue through our first verification screen. Easy peasy, rice and cheesy. Total sales for the day in ounces. It makes it sound like a dispensary. How terrible. It's supposed to be ounces of coffee. This is back before crazy stuff was legal. Lord help us. Pastor's going to see this video. No, you're not. All right. So we selected the entry for 3 as the total coffee sold in ounces. Total sales for the day is 0 ounces, which makes sense because we haven't sold any coffee yet. Did I pause at the break point? Oops. Something broke. Let's run the code again. No breakpoints. I think when you put a breakpoint, it actually highlights it in red. You can go down and find it. Stab it. You ever fuss at your code? You know what's crazy? I have this on here, but I keep looking because it's bigger. Run the code. I want to thank all of my sponsors today. All the regulators, you guys are the best. My wonderful wife, Sherry. Coffee shop. Welcome to work. We're going to do the same thing that we did earlier, which was we hit the number 3, and we got our entry. Now it's asking us to make a selection again. It didn't break that time, which makes me nervous. I thought it would. I'm going to run it one more time, try and see if we can break it. Employee name, job. We hit a 3. Oh, and it works just fine. Total sales for the day, 0 ounces. Enter a selection again. 3 again. Did it again. It doesn't actually look like it's doing anything because the screen refreshed quickly, but it does something in between each step. All right, we're good. Now it's no longer giving us an error because we're taking an input prompt at each iteration. Now we're going to take a new order. The last bug that we saw, taking a new order, I hit number 1, goes to our new orders. I feel like it's important to show you what happens when I do that. In our menu choice, right, we verified the employee. While the menu choice is not equal to 5, we display the menu, we get the menu choice. That menu choice at this point, yeah, we're going to put it in our watch window. If I can use the mouse. Menu. Thank you. Menu. What is the story? Oh, it's expecting an input. There's no breakpoint. It's hard to use a debugger when you're not actually have a breakpoint. Broke point. We continue forward. Enter the customer name. It's expecting me to enter the name. That's why I can't edit the actual code. Andrew. Well, Andy. Good as Andy, my coworker. How many small copies does he want? 1, 2. Sorry, can't go back. How many mediums? We'll do 1 of each. His total sales for the day. Sales total for a large, a medium, and a small coffee is $5.65. A better menu would actually have a secondary pop-up that showed the actual items on the menu with their corresponding prices. So we have 565 in sales. So now we want to find out how many sales we got. So we hit the number 3. That's coffee and sales. That's misleading. So the number 4, and then because I put that breakpoint here, so I'm going to put the item to watch as menu choice. And it sees the 4 that we put in. I'm going to undo this breakpoint, and we'll continue with the code. This whole thing is still running through the while loop because while we haven't entered the number 5 yet for our menu choice, because it's not 5, we're still good. Oh, I forgot I can make that a whole screen. Look at that. So we entered 4. Entered 4. 4. Ah, I forgot to continue. Oh no! It broke. Invalid literal. I think it saw my space that I accidentally put in. It was expecting a number. I put a space. It goes back to input validation. We're going to sell coffee to Andy, one of each, 565. Now we want the total sales for the day. It's 4. Sales total $5.65, which is what we're expecting. We're going to make another sale. This one goes to Clarence. He's going to get no smalls, no medium, 100 large, 200 even. 200 for 100 coffees. You got the bulk discount. The pricing on here is terrible. So now we want to find out how much our total sales are. So we have our 200 from Clarence and our 565 from Andy. So when I hit 4, it should be 200, 565. But it's not. It's only 200, or only remembers the previous sale. This is going to be a big problem when your till is only the last sale that you made, and especially if it wasn't one like this. So we get Andrew instead of Andy, his order in, and it's going to be a problem. So we got to find out what is happening with our sales total as we go through the menu, how it's tracked, how it's passed between functions, and how it updates on a global variable scale. And that is going to be 30 minutes of windup. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how that particular data is, like where that price is coming from. When it presents it to the screen, where is that number coming from? How is it updated over each iteration? What are we tracking exactly? This is important as a skill because in your developing life, statistics show that you're going to be working with code you didn't actually write. I do it at work all the time. Maybe not all the time, but I do it enough. Right now I'm working on a big project that's similar to a project that they've done in Europe, and I'm taking what they've made for a global scale and putting it on North America. So I'm having to take and understand what they did, which is why comments are super important. Comment your code. You're probably not the last one to look at it. Now, stuff that we're doing in class, maybe you might remember, but eventually you're going to get to a point where you're going to just want that documentation. So please, in the name of Jesus, comment your code. So we can work backwards. Where are we getting this dollar sign from, this dollar amount from that's being displayed to our screen? We know that it has something to do with the sales, right? Because we're showing the total sales. We know that that price point is being displayed to the screen. They told me I shouldn't wait for you. So it's talking about taking the problem and working backwards. So we know what it's doing. It's giving us a dollar amount. So where is it giving that dollar amount? How is it printing that to the screen? So we know that when our menu choice is 4, it's printing out to the screen. So we have a function here, show me the money. This function takes in 3 variables. Num small, num medium, num large. Another handy trick, you hit the control. I'm holding control on my keyboard, you can't see. Highlight over it, and it takes you to that function. Show me the money. Calculates and prints the total dollars of coffee sold. But it does weird stuff here. It takes in three variables, number of small, number of medium, and number of large. And it does a computation. It adds in num small, which is a parameter, and it multiplies it by the small price. Just like we can do with functions, when you hold down the control button and it takes you to it, you can do the same thing with variables. Like if I don't know where small price is initiated, I can click the control button, hold it down, and then click on it, and it takes me to where it's created, which is really cool. I wish that there was a way to get back to where I was, kind of jump back and forth, but you know, one thing at a time. Unless, nah, it's worth a shot. So it takes our total number of small cup and it multiplies it by this price. And that's how we get to show me the money. Minimize all of the things that we're not actively working on so that it helps me find what we are working on faster. There's a shortcut for that too, but we're not going to do that yet. So that num small, so it keeping track not of the dollar sales total per day, not what's in the till, but the number of cups that we've sold. And then it multiplies whatever that number is to the global variable, the small price. So when we sold 200 larges to Andrew earlier, this number would have been 200. And it multiplies it against that large price, which we saw earlier as, what, 2? Yeah, $2. These prices are ridiculous. All right. Show me the money. Show me the money. Num small, num medium, num large. So the question we need to ask is really twofold. One, do we want a variable by itself that we can use to keep track of the, the number of dollars that we've sold, which makes sense? Or do we want to go based on this computation that it tracks our total number of cups that we've sold and then extrapolates that data from there and has a total after the fact? It's really up to you. The design choice. But since this is already written, let's dive a little deeper and find out. Because if the dollar amounts are wrong, it's not because the price is wrong, because the price is static. It's the tracking of how many cups that are sold that are wrong. If it remembers that we just sold Andrew 200 large cups, but it doesn't remember that we sold Andy, with the names, the one of each, then we should have one small, one medium, and 201 large. But it only remembers, yeah, thank you. That's correct with the math. So now we got to find out where these variables are at, where they're stored, where they're created, how they're used. So I hold down my little control button and I click on it. That doesn't help. I think it's because everything is minimized. Let's try again. It'd be good if I hit the right button. Num small. Sell coffee. Num small. Initiation. Initialization. When we sell the coffee, it sets it to 0. So every time we hit the number 1 with our menu option, it goes to sell coffee. And then every time sell coffee starts, it resets these variables back to 0. So even if they were something else ahead of time, now they're 0. So what we need to do is we need to move the total cups somewhere else. So we're going to make 3 more variables. Make total total small, comma, total medium. I can't decide which style method I want. What I'm doing here is called camel case. Over here we've got the underscores. Oh, that's right, they're capitals, so they're global variables. They're constants. That's why they're capitals. So these variables here are not changing. They're constant. They're global variables, but they don't change. We're not updating the prices in our app. These price of coffee is just going to be the price. That's why they're capitalized. Go ahead.
Does the capitalization actually change the behavior of the code, or is that just for your memory?
That's a great question. It's just a styling choice. This is something that just programmers in general using PEP 8 guidelines have decided that capital letters, constants. You can use them however you want. But the programming Python-y way of doing things, capitals, constants. But it's not going to force you. Computer doesn't care. That could be, the letter L 12 times. So total medium, total small, total large is equal to, we establish it as 0, 0, 0. I like to put a space between them. You don't have to. It's just a styling thing. So instead of doing them one at a time, I can just do them all together. This is going to be important because eventually we're going to get to a point to where we remember how many cups we've sold the day before so that we can track our sales over a week. And what this does is it pulls the information from a file. It's most likely going to be a text file saved onto your computer, like a .txt, like a notepad. I don't remember that. Oops. Here we go. So it'll probably save to the file, and then at the beginning, start of the app, we'll read from that file, and that will be our initialization. That should not be open. Okay. But for right now, we're going to set them to 0, just on a one-day basis, or I guess technically a shift basis. So we've got our total small, total medium, and total large. These are our cups sold. So with our sell coffee, we have our number of small, number of medium, number of large. That's for that one order. That's not going to be for everything, even though it seems to be the variable that we pass along to every function. Notice how show me the money is actually here as well. Interesting. What show me the money does is it takes the number of small, medium, and large, and it presents the price to the customer. That's also the same function that we're using when we select the number 4 in our main menu option. There's two things that we can do to handle this. What I'm going to do is instead of having that function there, I'm just going to copy these 2 lines, and I'm going to put them in the sell coffee. I'm not going to delete this line of code. I'm just going to comment it out. Come on with the... Yeah. So don't delete your stuff unless you're ready to, unless you're fully tested, you're happy with how it looks, everything is fine. Then you can go back and clean up the extra stuff that's nonsense that's there. But if it's working, don't delete it yet. You can comment it out and be the same thing as getting rid of it, but you might need it, so don't delete it. I have made the mistake. Don't do that. Just comment your stuff out. The computer will ignore it. So instead, what show me the money does is it called a printing function, did that computation, right? I don't know why I'm scrolling down, the stuff is right here. It gives us the sales total. It takes the number of smalls, mediums, and larges that we just got from the customer and prints those to the screen, line 111. Afterwards, it returns those same num, small, medium, and large, as well as the ounces. Ounces, why does it not? Well, we'll come back to ounces later. We're not quite there yet. So we've got our, instead of printing to the screen using the show me the money app function, it just computes the total and then it prints that to a variable we didn't tell it what the variable was. This should work now. for sales, one for her name, one, one, one. And it broke again. We'll continue this on next time on your regularly scheduled programming.